Hi folks, this is Andrew, and yeah, it is about time that I did a video on the brachial plexus. The brachial plexus, it's one of those that's got it's got a real rep, in just anatomy study generally. Like you can talk to people that studied anatomy years and years and years ago, and they'll still give you that look of sort of horror of, oh my god, the brachial plexus. It's one that sort of most people remember struggling with when they were learning anatomy, which is really interesting. I'm not quite sure why it's the brachial plexus in particular has got such a rep. But yeah, brachial plexus, we're talking innervation of the upper limb. Yeah, so most, not all, but most of the innervation of the skin of the upper limb, so sensation, and also the muscles of the upper limb, including the muscles of the shoulder. Most of it is all derived from the brachial plexus. Yeah, so it's quite important. It's important to know about, and it is, I think, like a med school sort of favourite in terms of exams and stuff like that. So definitely worth having a look at. So let's have a chat. So the basics to build on for the brachial plexus, the things that you need to take away from this video is, number one, I've already said it, the brachial plexus is the source of the majority of the innervation of the upper limb. Yeah, not everything. There's a couple of muscles that aren't. As far as I'm aware, all sensation of the upper limb is the brachial plexus. So yeah, it's not 100%, but the vast majority of your motor innervation of the upper limb, your sensory innervation, brachial plexus. Number two, the brachial plexus is formed out of your spinal cord nerve roots, C5, C6, C7, C8 and T1. And we'll talk a little bit about those nerve roots because C8 is just a little bit, it's worth talking about because we've only got 7 cervical bones, yet we end up with 8 cervical nerve roots. And just a couple of minutes talking about that will be useful and sort of consolidate that. So the important thing there is, if it's just those 5 nerve roots that contribute to the brachial plexus, if you're ever asked what's the spinal cord innervation of a particular nerve, like what spinal cord roots contribute to this nerve, if it's in the upper limb, you shouldn't be saying anything other than C5 to T1. Yeah, it's not going to be all of those for most of the nerves, but that's the range that we're talking about. Yeah. Number 3 for the brachial plexus, the brachial plexus is divided up into sections as you move distally away from the spinal cord. So you've got the roots, then you've got the trunks, the divisions, the cords, and then the branches. And once you're happy with that sort of progression through the plexus, it's worth mapping that onto the neck and the axilla itself. Yeah, so you've got a bit of a 3D map of where this is all actually happening in 3-dimensional space. Yeah, just having that, taking the schematic and then putting it onto an actual living anatomy would be useful here, and we'll talk about it. Number four, I'm only going to talk about the 5 main peripheral branches of the brachial plexus. I'm only going to talk about the musculoskeletal nerve, the axillary nerve, the radial nerve, the median nerve, and the ulnar nerve in this video. There are other branches, lots of other branches, but I'll do those another time. With these 5 main ones, for most of these 5 main branches, you can link the branches to a particular muscular compartment of the upper limb, and it's worth just consolidating that and making sure you can do that. And then finally, number 5, very, very practical hands-on tip. If we all know in reality, looking at the brachial plexus on an actual specimen, it just looks like spaghetti. Yeah, it all just it looks like an absolute mess. The nerves are all the same colour as the arteries and the veins, and it's very, really difficult to tell anything apart. Yeah. In terms of navigating the brachial plexus, my tip would be to look for the M shape that is formed by your musculocutaneous nerve, your median nerve, and your ulnar nerve. They make quite a nice distinctive M shape in front of the axillary artery. So if you can find that M, you can then start to navigate the rest of the plexus, providing you understand, you know the schematic well enough. Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the video. Okay. It is heavy, yeah, there's a fair amount to talk about here, but it's interesting. I do like the brachial plexus, so hopefully we'll have fun with it. Yeah, go on, let's crack on. Okay, just a quick mention to begin with about the functions of the brachial plexus, i.e. what parts of the nervous system are we talking about when we're talking about the nervous tissue that goes through the brachial plexus, yeah? Have already said sensory and motor, yeah? So most sources will describe the brachial plexus as one of the somatic nervous system plexuses in the body, yeah? Sensory nervous system, motor nervous system, these are the conscious elements of the nervous system. So we would describe it as being part of the somatic nervous system. So definitely sensory nerve neurons travel through the brachial plexus and motor neurons travel through the brachial plexus to supply the skin and the muscles respectively. The thing to bear in mind, the thing to remember is there is also going to be an autonomic component within the brachial plexus. Yeah, there are sympathetic neurons that travel through this plexus. Okay, now remember your sympathetic nervous system, so yeah, part of your autonomic, the unconscious nervous system, yeah, but the sympathetic nervous system, specifically fight or flight. Yeah, it's about prepping you to either run away from a bear or to fight a bear, yeah, in evolutionary terms. Okay, the way to remember that is to just think about it logically. Yeah, if we think about the fight or flight response, yeah, the things that happen when the sympathetic nervous system kicks in, one of the big things that happens is our blood pressure increases, yeah, in order to more sort of effectively push oxygen out into the tissues in order for it to be used properly, yeah, and also redirecting blood away from less important structures in the context of fighting a bear to more important structures, yeah? And you think about realistically where we want to send blood in those fight or flight situations, it's to our limbs, isn't it? Yeah, so your blood vessels in your upper and lower limbs have to be able to constrict and dilate in response to a fight or flight scenario, which means there has to be sympathetic neurons to go to the blood vessels in your limbs in order to modulate that response. Yeah, so it's just worth bearing in mind that yes, the brachial plexus is carrying all nervous tissue, all types of neurons to the upper limb. Yeah, and that is going to be sensory neurons, motor neurons, and sympathetic neurons. No parasympathetic. Yeah, parasympathetic nervous system is confined to the head, neck, and the trunk. Yeah, but in the brachial plexus, you've got sensory neurons, motor neurons, and sympathetic neurons. So just bear that in mind. Okay. All right. So we said the brachial plexus. Yeah, the derivative nerve roots that contribute to the brachial plexus is C5 to T1, yeah, so C5, C6, C7, C8, T1, yeah, and I do just want to spend a couple of minutes talking about where exactly those are coming from off the spinal cord, yeah, because it is at this point that the rules about spinal nerve roots change slightly, yeah, so obviously very, very minimalist schematic, but these are the bones of the cervical spine, yeah, so actually you could just draw the skull on top of here, yeah, skull. So skull is sat on top of the C1 vertebra, C2, C3, C4, C5, C6, C7, 7 cervical bones in total, and then you're into the thoracic vertebra with T1, yeah, with the spinal cord going straight down the middle. Okay? Now, right at the top, we know that pairs of spinal nerves come off in between each of these bones, yeah? When they start right at the top of the spinal cord, the nerve root comes out above its associated vertebrae. Yeah? So the C1 nerve root is going to come off the spinal cord above the C1 vertebra. The C2 comes off above C2, and so on and so forth, all the way down to here. Yeah, so from C1 down to C7, the rule is that the nerve root comes out above its associated vertebra. Once you get to here, the next nerve root down, which comes off between C7 and T1, logic would tell us it should be the T1 nerve root. For a reason that I don't know, It's just occurred to me that I don't know why this is the case. If anyone does know, put it in the comments, yeah? But the nerve root that comes out below C7 is then the C8 nerve root, okay? Yeah, so this is where the C8 nerve root comes from. There's only 7 cervical bones, but between C7 and T1, the nerve root that emerges here is the C8 nerve root, okay? And then just think, once we get below this point then, the rule changes. Instead of the nerve root coming out above its associated vertebrate, the T1 nerve root is going to come out below T1. The T2 nerve root below T2, the T3 nerve root below T3, and that then is true all the way down the rest of the spinal cord. Yeah, all the way down through the thoracic spine, through the lumbar spine. Yeah, the L1 nerve root is below the L1 bone, the L2 nerve root below the L2 bone, all the way down to the bottom. Yeah, so it's only in the C spine that the nerve root is above the bone. Below T1, the nerve root is below the bone because C8 has snuck in between C7 and T1. Okay, so this is the arrangement of the spinal nerves, and obviously with the brachial plexus, we are looking at these. Yeah, so it is C5 down to T1. C5 to T1. These are the nerve roots that contribute to the brachial plexus. Okay, and yeah, just have a bit of an awareness of where they actually come off the neck. All right. Okay. Next up, let's just learn how to draw the damn thing. Yeah. I think that's where most people struggle. That's where most people sort of get their grief from. It's the fact that there is this expectation that you can just draw the brachial plexus from memory. So yeah, let's just go through. I'll go through my way of remembering how just to throw the schematic up. Yeah, and to be fair, if you have that schematic clear in your head, a lot of the other bits and pieces of the brachial plexus become that much easier to apply if you have sort of the basic framework in your mind. But I'm not going to lie, this is gimmicky. This is very, very superficial kind of learning, isn't it? We're basically just learning how to draw a picture, but such is life. Yeah, so let's just learn how to draw the brachial plexus. So we've already said 5 nerve roots, so we'll start on this side: C5, C6, C7, C8, T1. Okay, the way I remember to draw the brachial plexus is very gimmicky. Yeah, I work on the rule that I draw 2 arrows, I then draw 3 lines, I then draw another 2 arrows, and then I draw an X and a Y. Yeah, 2 arrows, 3 lines, 2 arrows, X and Y. Okay, so first you draw 2 arrows, and the arrows are here and here. Yeah, they're the two arrows connecting C5, C6 and connecting C8, T1. Okay, step 2, draw your 3 lines. So one line goes across here, one line goes across here, and then the middle line has a gap in the middle, like that. Okay? Next up, draw another 2 arrows. So we've already drawn these 2 here. We're just going to draw these again, but bigger. The first one goes here, arrow, and the second one goes here, arrow. Okay? Step 4, draw the X. So the X is going to be here. So we've drawn one line of the X, we just need to draw the other line of the X. That's the X. Yeah. And then finally, step 5, draw a Y. And the Y slots in sort of here. So it's a sideways Y, and it looks like that. Yeah, that's the Y. Yeah, like that. Okay. And then that is the brachial plexus. Okay, I'll go through that again. Do draw this with me as you're doing it. Yeah, you're not gonna just watching me do it. It's probably gonna be fucking useless to you. Yeah, so draw it along with me as we go through. Yeah, so we'll do it again. So step 1, draw 2 arrows. First arrow, second arrow. Step 2, draw 3 lines. One line here, and one line with a gap in the middle. Step 3, draw another 2 arrows. One arrow here, and one arrow here. Step 4, draw the X. That's the X. And step 5, draw a Y, and the Y is that. Okay, and that is the brachial plexus. Okay, so that's my way of doing it. There's going to be loads. There's going to be, you look on the internet, there'll be loads of memory aids of how to draw the brachial plexus. I think the rule here is it's just going to be repetition. Yeah, you need to actually just sit there and just draw it again and again and again and again. Yeah, because when I first started teaching anatomy, I wouldn't have been able to do this off the top of my head. Yeah, it literally just a case of just doing it again and again and again until it sort of sinks in. And like I said, it's very superficial learning. There's no deeper understanding of anatomy here. But once this is up, you can then start to think about everything else that we're going to talk about, the trunks, the divisions, the chords, etc., etc. But having just the schematic in your head first sets the scene a little bit. So it's definitely worth having a think about how you're going to remember to draw this. Yeah? But okay, that's my system for doing it. Okie doke, so now let's have a look at the schematic of the plexus in a bit more detail and have a look at the various sections that we need to sort of focus on. So not to be a stuck record, but we'll throw the schematic up again one more time just so we can get into the habit of doing it. Yeah. So, and I'm going to do it a bit more carefully this time. So yeah, first thing, draw 2 arrows. So 1, 2. Next, draw 3 lines. 1, 2, 3. Next, draw our other 2 arrows. 1 and 2. Number 4, draw our X. That's the X. And number 5, draw our Y. That's the Y. Okay, so that's the brachial plexus. Okay, and I mentioned it right at the start. Yeah, we can divide. Obviously, this is the spinal cord, isn't it? Yeah, so the spinal cord. So as we're moving this way, excuse me. As we're moving this way, we're moving distal to the spinal cord. Yeah, so we're moving away from the spinal cord. The way to divide the brachial plexus up, we divide it up into 5 sections overall. Yeah, we've got the roots, the trunks, the divisions, the chords, and the branches. Okay, so if I let me put those up just quickly now to sort of, and then we can chat about it. Yeah, fine. Okay, so hopefully we can sort of see here, I've divided that up into this bit, this bit, this bit, this bit, this bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, and these are the roots, which we already knew, didn't we? We've been calling them roots the whole time. C5, C6, C7, C8, C1. Yeah. These are the trunks, and we'll talk about those in a second. These are the divisions, these are the chords, and then these are the peripheral branches. Yeah, read that damn cadaver book. Yeah, roots, trunks, divisions, chords, branches. Yeah, read that damn cadaver book from proximal to distal. Okay, so the roots speak for themselves, C5 to T1, yeah? We can see, just looking at this, we've got 3 trunks, yeah? And they're nice and easily named. From top to bottom, you have the superior trunk, which is formed out of C5 and C6. You have the middle trunk, which is exclusively C7. And then you have the inferior trunk, which is made up of C8 and T1. So the trunks are nice and easy. Superior, middle, inferior. Okay. Next up, we've got the divisions. Okay. So this is where it can start to get a little bit muddled and a bit sort of spaghetti looking and people sort of lose track of where they're going. Yeah. The take home message with the divisions is that all 3 of your trunks have to give off an anterior division and a posterior division. Yeah. All 3 of these give off one anterior division and one posterior division. Yeah. all three posterior divisions, so the posterior division of this one, the posterior division of this one, and the posterior division of this one, all end up coming together to form a single chord. So if you know that, then you can follow, I'll do these in a different colour, should I? You can then look to see from these which three lines are all coming to merge into one, yeah? And it is this one, and this one. Yeah, you can see this line coming down here, this line coming across, and this line coming up here, yeah? Made by that first, well, the second lot of 2 arrows that we did. Yeah, we drew the first 2 arrows here, then this big arrow is the posterior divisions of the superior, middle, and inferior trunks. Yeah, which means it stands to reason that the others, so this one, which is coming up to meet it, and then this one, which is standing on its own, these are going to be your anterior divisions. Okay, I hope that makes sense. I hope you can sort of see that. It might be easier if I actually sort of just draw the lines over the top, actually. They're your anterior divisions, and they're your posterior divisions. Okay, but each of the 3 trunks gives off one of each. Nice and easy, yeah? Next up, we've got the chords. So the chords are, we'll talk about, I'll explain why the chords are named what they are a bit later, but the chords are basically called, what kind of word is it? So the top chord is called the lateral chord, the bottom chord is called the medial chord, and then the middle one is called the posterior chord. Yeah? Now, if you think, we can see that the posterior chord is made up of our 3 posterior divisions. So that makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah? The 3 posterior divisions all come together to form the posterior chord. Okay? And then you've got the lateral chord, which is made up of the anterior divisions of superior trunk and middle trunk. And then you've got the medial chord, which is made up of the anterior division of the inferior trunk. Yeah? Now, the reason these are named how they are is it's describing where the chord is relative to the axillary artery. Yeah? And when we actually map this onto the axilla and everything like that, we'll have a look at that. But that's why these are named lateral, posterior, and medial. It's where the chord is relative to the axillary artery, which travels through the armpit. Okay? But we'll talk about that. And then last but not least, you've got the branches, yeah? And I said we're only going to talk about the 5 main branches, the 5 terminal branches of the brachial plexus. And for this, different people have different things. I just rely on MAMRU. Yeah, MAMRU. Whatever you need to do to make that memorable, okay? So from top to bottom, we have got the musculocutaneous nerve, which is a branch of the lateral cord of the brachial plexus. This next one down, if we just follow the Y, remember that final stage of drawing was the Y, we can see that this is going to be a branch of the posterior cord. Yeah, A stands for your axillary nerve. Okay. Next one down, if we just follow this back, we can actually see that this nerve is formed by the lateral cord and the medial cord coming together. And this, you can imagine lateral and medial coming together to meet in the middle. Median, yeah, the median nerve. Okay, we've then got R, which is the other branch of the Y, so the other branch of the posterior cord. This is the radial nerve. And then finally, we've got a branch of the medial cord, which is the ulnar nerve. Yeah, and that's MAMRU, musculocutaneous, axillary, median, radial, and ulnar. Yeah, and do look at how it relates to the previous parts of the brachial plexus. Yeah, get into the habit of saying, so the musculocutaneous nerve is a branch of the lateral cord of the brachial plexus. The lateral cord is formed by the anterior divisions of the superior trunk and the middle trunk, and the superior trunk is formed from C5 and C6, the middle trunk is formed by C7. Yeah? Just do one more as an example, the radial nerve. The radial nerve is a branch of the posterior cord of the brachial plexus. The posterior cord is formed by the posterior divisions of all three of superior trunk, middle trunk, and inferior trunk. And superior is formed from C5, C6, middle is C7, and inferior is C8, T1. Yeah? So just focus on trying to link it all together to make these relate to each other, because then that gives you a more comprehensive picture, okay? And the reason that's important is because when it comes to thinking about the specific nerve roots that form each of these nerves, if you can trace it back far enough, it makes sense, yeah? To use the radial nerve, just as the example that we did, we managed to follow the radial nerve back to all 5 of these nerve roots, yeah? Because the radial nerve comes off the posterior cord. The posterior cord is formed by all 3 trunks, and all 3 trunks relate to all 5 nerve roots. So if you actually look in your textbooks about what is the nerve roots that contribute to the radial nerve, it is all 5 of C5, C6, C7, C8, and T1. It's all 5 of them together. Yeah? Whereas if you look at something, if you say use the ulnar nerve as an example, we can see that the ulnar nerve is a branch of the medial cord. The medial cord is only formed by the anterior division of the inferior trunk. Yeah, nothing else is contributing to this. It's only the it's only the anterior division of the inferior trunk, and the inferior trunk is formed from C8 and T1. Therefore, the contributing nerve roots to the ulnar nerve can only be C8 and T1. Because there's no other way. There's no way for these 3 to get down to the ulnar nerve. Yeah? So that's why it's important to have this schematic in your head and being able to map it all together. Because then actually, you don't have to sit there and try and rote learn which nerve roots contribute to which nerve. Because this is tricky stuff. Like, this is difficult to keep in your head if you don't give it like meaning and significance. The meaning and significance is how it all relates together and actually following the journey sort of through. Yeah, I hope I've convinced you. And I hope this makes sense. I'm looking at it now and it's looking a bit messy. But yeah, I'm hoping you've followed that through as we've gone through. So this is the schematic of the brachial plexus. We've talked about the 5 sections: roots, trunks, divisions, cords, and branches. Read that, Dan could have a book. And then, yeah, trunks, superior, middle, and inferior. You've got anterior and posterior divisions. You've got the lateral, posterior, and medial cords. And then the branches specifically that we're talking about is mammaru, musculocutaneous, axillary, median, radial, and ulnar. Yeah. And maybe if I've got time at the end, I'll have a chat about how we can broadly sum up the functions of these nerves. Okay. Okay, so now hopefully maybe we're at a point where the schematic of the brachial plexus is clear in our head. Please do go back and watch all of that again if you need to. Only if you found it useful. If you didn't find it useful the first time, don't watch it again, go somewhere else. But yeah, now hopefully if you got to a point where the schematic is clear in your head, then we can have a think about mapping it onto actual anatomy. Yeah, where does that whole diagram fit in the actual human body? Yeah. Now, we're going to be testing my artistic ability here. Hopefully if I explain it as I go through, then we'll just see what we end up with, yeah? So, vertebrae, yeah? We're going to do an anterior view, yeah? So, looking at the vertebrae down here, so we've got C1 at the top, going all the way down to T2, and I've already put in the nerve roots. Remember, in the C-spine, the nerve root comes out above its vertebrate, so that first line is the C5 nerve root above the C5 bone, C6, C7, you've then got C8 between C7 and T1, and then T1 is below the T1 bone. Okay, so these have emerged from the spinal cord, which will be running down, through all these bones. Yeah, they've emerged off the spinal cord and have exited the vertebral column. Okay, now we know the first thing that needs to happen is it's those first set of arrows, isn't it? Yeah, the C5 and C6 nerve roots have to come together. The C8 and T1 nerve roots have to come together, and the C7 nerve root just carries on by itself. Yeah, that's the first thing that happens. Now, what is actually going on in the body where this is happening? So we're still very close to the vertebral column. Yeah, we're still quite sort of central. This coming together of these nerve roots is happening in between two muscles. Yeah, it's sandwiched between one muscle behind it and one muscle in front of it. And both of these muscles, you may not have come across them yet, but both of these muscles are called scalene muscles. And I do need to add some extra bits and pieces in here. Okay, so I'm going to draw in the first and second rib. First and second rib, obviously coming off the T1 vertebrate and then the T1, T2 junction. Yeah, so the first rib would be sort of coming round here. Yeah, and then the T2 would be sort of like that. Yeah, first and second rib coming off there, okay? The reason I've drawn them in is because those two muscles are scalene muscles. They both attach onto the first rib, okay? So I'll just broadly speaking draw them in. The two muscles we're looking at are our anterior scalene and our middle scalene, okay? So the middle scalene is going to be behind the nerve roots. The middle scalene comes off the sides of pretty much all of your cervical vertebrae, all the way from sort of C2 down to C7, yeah? So it's going to be coming off all of these, all the way down behind the nerve roots, and then it sort of goes down to insert onto the first rib. So sort of like that. Yeah. The nerve roots are then going to go over the top of that. So just to put them in again, they're over the top of scalene, of the middle scalene, like that. Yeah, and then in front of the nerve roots, you then have the anterior scalene, which comes off of the sides of vertebrates C3 to C6, I think. So something like that, to then also insert onto the first rib. Yeah, already this diagram looks like an absolute train wreck. But the take-home message here is that we've got these two muscles that are coming down from the sides of the cervical vertebrate to insert onto the first rib. These muscles, they're involved in lateral flexion of the head. Yeah, you can imagine if these muscles pull, the C-spine is going to bend that way. Yeah, so it's going to tilt your head to the side. Alternatively, if both sides, you know, because you'll have muscles on the other side as well, if they both contract, they can actually help lift the rib cage up for when you need to take deep breaths. Yeah, so that's your scalene muscles. But basically, your middle scalene attaches to the first rib, your anterior scalene attaches to the first rib, and then the first two arrows of our nerve roots coming together is happening sandwiched between the two. Okay, so still very much in the neck. You need to look for your scalene muscles in order to find the nerve roots, yeah, as they come off the spinal cord, and this is where they come together. Okay? Hopefully so far so comprehensive. Once they've travelled through those two muscles, then once they've emerged, this is where you see the trunks forming, yeah? And remember, once these have come together, that is going to be the superior trunk, that will be the middle trunk, and then this will be the inferior trunk. Okay, so we're still in the neck. Yeah, we're still very sort of high up. Yeah, this is where the trunks are forming, sort of around about here-ish. Okay, now the trunks will then go down through the neck. Yeah, and when they reach the base of the neck, I'm going to draw some more bony anatomy here. In order for structures to get from the neck into the axilla, yeah, because this is how we communicate with the upper limb, they do have to travel through something called the cervico-axillary canal, yeah? Use the name, cervico means neck, axillary means axilla, armpit, yeah? So the canal is what connects the two. What we basically mean by that, I don't want to overcomplicate this, they basically have to go behind the clavicle. They need to go behind your collarbone, yeah? So if I then draw the clavicle on, so we're going to have to draw the sternum, aren't we? So if we just draw the sternum kind of like that, Yeah, so the second rib articulates with the angle of Louis, which is sort of the junction between your manubrium and the body of the sternum. The first rib is a little bit higher up. Coming off the top of the sternum, you then have the clavicle, which would just go across like this. Yeah, so that then is your collarbone. Yeah, and basically, once your trunks have formed, as they've emerged from between the two scaling muscles, they go down through the neck, and it's only once they go behind the clavicle that you then start to see the divisions coming off. Yeah, so once we're behind the clavicle, we have effectively left the neck, we're entering the axilla, so it's in sort of that junction between the two that the divisions start to form. Yeah, now this is going to test me because I don't think I've ever actually drawn the divisions not on schematic form. So what do we need to draw? We need to draw the posterior divisions all coming together to form the posterior chord, which is going to be, if I just get rid of this for a second, we're going to have one posterior chord, two posterior chords, three posterior chords to form the one posterior division, two posterior divisions, three posterior divisions to form the posterior chord. We're then going to have one anterior division and two anterior divisions to form the lateral chord, and we're then going to have just the anterior division of the inferior trunk to form the medial chord. Yeah, so lateral's here, posterior's here, and medial is here. Yeah, and we're now below the clavicle into the actual armpit. Okay? Cool. Like I said, the reason the chords are named as they are is because it's all about their position relative to the axillary artery. Yeah, so the axillary artery obviously is going to also pass through the axilla. It is the main blood vessel that supplies the upper limb. So it, from your heart, remember blood supply, always go back to the heart. You've got your heart, you've got your left ventricle, ascending aorta, arch of the aorta, three branches of the arch of the aorta, brachiocephalic trunk, left common carotid and left subclavian. Yeah, the subclavians will then go behind the clavicle, and then as they enter the axilla, they become the axillary artery. Yeah, so you are going to have a whopping great artery traveling down here as well. Yeah, it's just going to be traveling through there. Okay, in order to get down to the upper limb. Okay, having come across sort of from here-ish. Yeah. And like I said, the chords are named after their position relative to the axillary artery. So the lateral chord is lateral, bearing in mind lateral is this side, yeah, lateral to the artery. The medial chord is medial to the artery, and then the posterior chord, as I've shown here, is completely obscured because it's behind the axillary artery, it's posterior to it. So you'd have to move the axillary artery out of the way in order to see the posterior chord behind it. Yeah? Okay. And then, last but not least, we're very much into the axilla now, we're very much into the armpit. You have then got the various peripheral branches that come off. So if I just sort of demonstrate the posterior chord popping out here, we know that the posterior chord gives off the Y, so we're going to have axillary artery, axillary nerve and radial nerve. Yeah. The lateral chord gives off the musculocutaneous, the medial chord gives off the ulnar, and then the lateral and medial chords come together to form the median nerve. And this then is our mammaru. Yeah, that's completely sideways. Let me write that again. Mammaru. Yeah, musculocutaneous coming off the lateral chord, axillary coming off the posterior chord, median coming off the lateral and the medial chord, radial coming off the posterior chord, and ulnar coming off the medial chord. Okay? So that's roughly how the brachial plexus corresponds to living anatomy. I'm aware this is shit. Yeah? You'll probably have better luck looking at actual images and actual diagrams. The reason I'm insisting on subjecting you to this monstrosity is I want you to hear someone talk it through as you go through. Yeah, rather than just looking at a static image and hoping to retain it. Actually, there are various landmarks to look out for. Yeah, the roots, yeah, are for roots. Look for the scaling muscles. The roots are sandwiched between them. The trunks, T for trunks, yeah, are going to then travel down the neck as far down as the clavicle. Once they get to the clavicle, we're then leaving the neck, entering the axilla. This is where the divisions happen and the cords are produced, the lateral cord, the posterior cord, the medial cord, which are then in the axilla to then give off their peripheral branches. Okay? Cool. And then the last thing that I want to sort of talk about, and I've sort of given a bit of an idea here, is if I just carry on filling in the blood vessels, yeah. So let's say the heart was here, yeah, anatomically accurate heart, yeah, gives off the arch of the aorta. The arch of the aorta comes off here. 3 branches of the arch of the aorta: the brachiocephalic trunk, the left common carotid, and the left subclavian. The brachiocephalic trunk on the right-hand side, bearing in mind this is the right-hand side, isn't it? Yeah, will then give off the right subclavian and the right common carotid. Yeah, so that's broadly speaking our blood supply, isn't it? Heart, ascending aorta, arch of the aorta, brachiocephalic trunk, left common carotid, left subclavian. You've then got the right subclavian being formed here. Once it enters the axilla, it then becomes the axillary artery. The axillary artery will carry on down here and will just carry on going all the way down to then eventually become the brachial artery, which then becomes the radial and the ulnar, yeah? Why is that relevant to a brachial plexus video? Well, because you need to be able to look at the axillary artery in order to navigate the brachial plexus, yeah? One, because we know that the cords are built around the axillary artery, yeah? Lateral cord is lateral to it, medial cord is medial to it, etc., etc. Remember I said at the beginning, look for the M, yeah? The M is here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah? If I just do it in a different colour to sort of demonstrate it again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah? We can see that it's formed by the musculocutaneous nerve, the median nerve, and the ulnar nerve. Yeah, this is the M, and the M is going to be in front of the axillary artery. Okay, so if you're looking at a specimen and it all just looks like spaghetti, yeah, like this does, if you focus in on the axilla, find the axillary artery, you're then looking for this M, yeah, the M that is formed by, effectively, the lateral cord and the medial cord giving off their respective branches and then coming together to form the median nerve. Yeah, so that is what I would look for. And then once you've found that M, you can then try and follow the plexus up as far as you can go. And if you know the schematic, then you can try and figure out what you're looking at. Okay? I don't know if this is going to make the final edit. I think I've potentially confused people more. I think I potentially confused myself more. It was worth a go. I'll have a look at it back and see if it makes the edit. Okay, and last but not least, I said I was going to do a little bit on those peripheral nerves, the MAMRU nerves, musculocutaneous, axillary, radial, median, and ulnar. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail about any of them because I'll talk about them. I'm going to do videos on upper limb muscular compartments probably in the next few weeks. So I'll talk about the individual nerves that innervate each compartment then. But just as a very, very quick summary, so we've got MAMRU, yeah, we've got musculocutaneous, we've then got axillary, we've then got median, we've then got radial, and then we've got ulnar. Yeah, in my best doctor's handwriting. Broadly speaking, so probably more important to think about the motor innervation than the sensory innervation. The sensory innervation is a bit more fiddly and a bit more bitty, so we'll just focus more on the muscles. Your musculocutaneous nerve is your anterior arm. Yeah, remember the arm, the true definition of arm is shoulder to elbow, so it's the upper arm, yeah? And the muscles on the anterior side of that, so that's your biceps brachii, your brachialis muscle, your coracobrachialis muscle, all of these innervated by the musculocutaneous nerve. Yeah? The axillary nerve doesn't really get its own compartment, but there are a couple of muscles that are innervated by the axillary nerve. So the most important, well, the most well-known one is the deltoid muscle, is innervated by the axillary nerve. Yeah, deltoid muscle is the one that sort of goes over the top of the glenohumeral joint to insert onto the side of the humerus. It's the very powerful abductor of the arm, yeah, moves the arm outwards. And then the other muscle innervated by the axillary nerve is teres minor, which is one of your rotator cuff muscles, yeah, which I'm not going to do in any sort of detail. Yeah, so they're the two main muscles innervated by the axillary nerve. Okay, next we've got the median nerve. So the median nerve, we're now thinking about the forearm and the hand, yeah, so we're below the elbow. The median nerve is responsible for most of the anterior forearm. So these are going to be your flexor muscles and your pronator muscles, yeah? And then it also supplies some of the intrinsic muscles of the hand, yeah? It's your half a loaf muscles, yeah? Which basically refers to first and second lumbricals, yeah, on the lateral side of the hand. Opponens pollicis, which is involved in moving the thumb, abductor pollicis brevis, which is involved in abducting the thumb, and flexor pollicis brevis, which is involved in flexing the thumb. So those muscles of the intrinsic hand are all innervated by the median nerve. Radial nerve is my favourite one because it's nice and easy with very few exceptions to the rule. The radial nerve supplies posterior upper limb. Yeah, and just remember, our radial nerve was a branch of the posterior cord, wasn't it? It was one of the few branches of the posterior. It was one of the two branches of the posterior cord. This one and this one. Yeah, so it makes sense that it supplies the posterior upper limb, and I mean everything on the posterior upper limb. So posterior upper arm, so the triceps is the radial nerve, and then all of the extensor muscles of the forearm, all of the muscles that are involved in extending the wrist, extending the fingers. These are all innervated by the radial nerve. Okay, so radial nerve, when you hear radial nerve, just think posterior everything. Okay, and then finally, the ulnar nerve. The ulnar nerve is responsible for a couple of muscles in the anterior forearm. So we'll do sort of in brackets anterior forearm, because it supplies like 1.5 muscles in the anterior forearm, yeah. Flexor carpi ulnaris and the ulnar half of flexor digitorum profundus. Again, if you've not done it, don't worry about it. I'll do a video on it at some point. And then the other big sort of motor function of the ulnar nerve is it does most of the intrinsic muscles of the hand. Yeah, so if it's not the half a loaf muscles, every other muscle in the hand, intrinsic to the hand, is innervated by the ulnar nerve. Okay, so they're the motor functions of these nerves. They do all have sensory components as well, and you do need to know sort of where on the skin each of these nerves is mapped to, particularly these three, median, radial and ulnar, because they sort of supply parts of the hand and you need to sort of know where they are. I'm not going to do that in this video. I've done enough, I think, in this video, but I will do one on the sort of the innervation of the upper limb another time. But yeah, that's a broad summary of the functions of our 5 peripheral branches of the brachial plexus. I hope that's helpful. Okay, folks, that's the end of that one. Yeah, I now do know why the brachial plexus does get a bad rep in anatomy learning, because it is fucking hard. I hope that was okay. I hope that was helpful to somebody at least. Please go back to the basics to build on that I covered at the start of the video. Just be very, very clear of where the brachial plexus comes from. Yeah, the nerve roots that contribute to it. Try and get a way of getting the schematic clear in your head, yeah? Whatever you need to do to be able to draw it, but then being able to break it down into its roots, its trunks, its divisions, etc., etc. And then, yes, I would say there are other nerves that come off the brachial plexus. Like I said, it's most of the nerves that supply most of the muscles to the upper limb. But the 5 main ones are the musculocutaneous, the axillary, the median, the radial, and the ulnar. And having a bit of once you're happy with that, it's then a bit of an opportunity to segue into learning about those nerves, where they go in the rest of the upper limb and thinking about the muscles that they supply, which I will do I'm going to do videos on that in the next sort of few weeks. Yeah, I hope that was useful. As ever, if you did enjoy the video, please give it a like. If you enjoy me, please subscribe to the channel. And if you do have any comments, please put it in... What did I say? If you've got any feedback, please put it in the comments below. I'll have a look out for it. God, I'm absolutely knackered. Right, I hope that was useful, folks. Thanks very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Have a good day. I'll see you later.